So I'm super excited for today. We're going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to me, obviously cold calling. It's one of my favorite topics to get into. So a couple things for today, because people ask, yes, it's got to be recorded. We'll send it out afterwards, all that kind of good stuff. If you have questions, the Q&A button at the bottom, as stuff comes up, we'll try to get to as much of it as we can. But we're going to talk about the approach, the mindset, the frameworks behind cold calling. And I have two great guests today joining me. Greg Reffner, he's the CEO and founder of Abstract AI. Pretty cool software, conversational intelligence. One of the things that it does that I really like is it does like this like live coaching, like in the moment coaching, like while you're cold calling, right? So for example, and it'll kind of tell you how to respond to certain things, talk tracks you might use, that sort of stuff. And David Priemer is the author of one of my favorite sales books. I got it right here on my desk, Sell the Way You Buy. And we've collaborated on other sales content and stuff before. But gentlemen, it's nice to have you. Ready to dig in? Talk about cold calling?
Let's do it.
100%. Before we get in though, Jason, can you show everyone your water bottle? Because I think Jason has like a casual flex where his water bottle somehow matches his shirt, which is, I don't know if that was pre-planned or not.
That's Costco. I was like, I'm going to get one of those really big, embarrassing jugs of water so I don't have to fill it up so much.
I love
The
it.
question is, does it fit in your car cup holder though?
It fits in the one right next to the little shifter, but the one up close, it's infuriating, dude. It doesn't fit into there.
First world problems.
It's pretty annoying. Yeah. Good to see everyone. So I think the first thing that I want to get into, like I said, we're going to talk mindset, approach, and then get really tactical with the framework. If we talk about the mindset, one of the things, Greg, just to kick the first question over your way, you talk a lot about, I think you mentioned this in our prep, imposing our own beliefs and value systems on the prospect. Do you want to kind of unpack that a little bit more and talk about the belief system that we have as a rep while we're making this and kind of being mindful of the prospects, sort of beliefs as well?
Yeah. So we just actually did some work as a company around personogenics, personality profiling, personality types, and the associated behaviors and the way people think associated with those personality types. I'm a very dominant person. So when I cold call somebody, I want to get right to the point. When someone cold calls me, if they pick up the phone and they're like, "Hey, Greg, this is why I'm calling you," I'm like, "Whoa, awesome. You have my attention." I think that's a huge problem with a lot of people, especially when they're new to cold calling, is they impose their expectations around how they want to be talked to or how they want to talk upon the person they're calling. And I think that's a gap in a lot of sales enablement, is the fact that there's not a lot of personality profile training and then the associated communication styles associated with that. And that I think there's a lot of things that there's friction that could be removed if we're calling somebody and we kind of have looked at their LinkedIn profile and if they listed out all of their accomplishments specifically with data points. Great. They're maybe an analytical person. Maybe we should be a little bit more analytical in our approach. So that's one of the first things that I kind of like to think about is don't impose your personality traits, your communication style preferences on the person that you're about to pick up the phone and cold call.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say, so I love this. I was at a conference back when I was at Salesforce. We did a conference called Sales Machine in New York City. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but they had Gary Vaynerchuk. A lot of people know Gary V came to speak, and he gets out there. And I don't know if we can do a poll, but let's light up the chat because I'm curious to hear what people have to say about this. He gets out, and this is like a room of 1,000 sales and marketing senior leaders. And he just starts with this. He's like, "Who hates it?" He asks them this question. And I want him to, so be ready to pounce in the feed. He says, "Who hates it when another human being calls them on the phone?" That was the question, right? Like, go to the chat. Who hates it when another human being calls them on the, and it wasn't like he was qualifying. Oh, it's your mother, or it's your friend. It's just like when another human being calls them on the phone. And some people like Gary Vee. Some people don't like when people call them on the phone. And 40% of the people in the room raised their hands. He's like, you know why you say that? Because the most valuable and precious resource we have is our time, especially in the day of, age of distraction. Is like when someone calls you on the phone, they are kind of stealing your time. And so I think for some of us, as you see in the Zoom chat, but also I would also say there's a generational element here too. And I see this a lot with young sellers. Like young sellers in their personal lives, like they say, I don't talk on the phone. Like I'm swiping left and right and Insta chatting and whatever with people. Like I don't talk on the phone all that much. And so what happens is when we start to think about how we're going to cold call people, we sometimes impose our own belief system of like, well, I don't like it when people bother me. I don't like talking to people on the phone, so I'm not going to call. And then what happens is when we are forced to call, because our managers are like, make the calls, we end up not being able to manifest the confidence and conviction. We need to convert the buyer because we're kind of emotionally encumbered by our own belief system. So that's what I would have to say around this. I see this a ton.
Yeah, I'm a living example of this too. I think the irony that I teach so many reps how to cold call, yet I never pick up cold calls. You know what I mean? Send me a message on email. Don't even hit me up on LinkedIn either. Like email is going to be the one channel that you can really get my attention, and I'll take the time to respond if it's good. But that's a really good example of your buyers have these preferences and you don't really know what those are, So if we kind of keep this string going of, okay, I need to remove my kind of bias essentially from this, or be aware of it at least. So how do we come into a call with a more neutral? How do we get to that state once we've acknowledged that, hey, we have these preferences, our buyer doesn't? How do we kind of get more neutral? And Greg, I'll kick that question your way to get started.
So I think there's a very logical approach that works for me. And when you think just like as a SDR, BDR, and you're calling someone, you have a goal, you have an outcome you're trying to achieve. I often talk about I love a lazy salesperson because they figure out the easiest way to win. And so I approach this how do we get over that hurdle by using logic? There's a company I used to use called Spam Titan. They would literally take every unsolicited email that I got and would folder it until the end of the day. And that's how all my unsolicited emails would get delivered to me. And it would be here's a report. Here's everything in your inbox that was sent to you unsolicited. The rise of those are extremely prevalent. And so email is getting harder and harder to get seen, to get viewed, to get read. And so I look at this and go, hey, you want to win? You want to be successful? You're not going to be successful emailing people. However, you are going to be successful picking up the phone with people. There's pretty repeatable numbers out there nowadays. We're 100 calls, 10 connections. Our customers are seeing 2 or 3 conversions for every 10 connections. I use logic. Hey, this is a harder way of winning. Go take the easy way of winning.
Well, how many calls, each of you guys, David and Greg, how many cold calls do you guys get a week? If you had to guess.
400.
I probably don't get as many
really?
as that's a lot. But yeah, I might get 30, a week. I mean, a lot of spam email and people reaching out on social media for sure, but
Dang, you guys are so popular. I maybe get 3 to 5 a week. How many cold emails do you guys get a week? Just rough napkin math.
So it's funny. I back in January when I had kind of put out on LinkedIn that I was going to do abstract full time. I kept joking I just got SDR'd, and it made me remember all the things that I used to do as an SDR, where I would look at job change and stuff on LinkedIn. I think I probably get 2,000 cold emails a week, and they're all
what?
Hey, as the CEO, you are struggling with this, or are you interested in lead gen? I do need a new number. I think somebody put in the chat you need a new number, and I 1,000% agree. I do need a new number. But that phone number is linked to so.
You need a new email address too, man.
Yeah. Maybe the witness relocation program, I think might be.
Yeah. What about you, David? How many emails do you say you get a week?
Yeah, I agree with some of the folks in the chat, 50, now a lot of them end up in spam and I just don't see them. But then I do get a lot of cold emails because, I have multiple emails on my website. People ask me for training or speaking, whatever. And so people just find these emails and just spam the crap at them. So I'd say there's quite a bit. Very few kind of personalized, if any, personalized emails. To Greg's point, they're like, oh, as the CEO of whatever. And it's actually staggering to me how many calls and emails and outreach I get where people get the information categorically wrong. They get my city wrong. They get my role wrong. They have someone else's like client information in the body of the thing that they forgot to remove the last time, right? So there's a lot of that. But if I can riff on maybe what Greg was saying before, like in terms of, mindset, one of the things I think about, like to really nail cold call, you have to have this kind of combination of extreme preparedness, right? Like one of the reasons why, sales reps struggle to manifest conviction is they're not really sure what to say, or when they get an objection, they're not really sure how to respond. I'm working with a big tech client now who says like their reps are getting, smashed over the head where all of a sudden they're cold calling or reaching out to clients and the customers are saying, hey, Greg, like, I can't, this is not a good time. I need to put together a recession preparedness plan. I'm being asked by my company. And then the reps are like, what the hell is this recession? I've never even heard of this thing before. Right. So, so there you go. So, being prepared with the types of objections you would expect to hear, and the narrative, one of the things that, again, with this client I was working with yesterday, I said, when you call customers, and especially now, and I say like cold calling was hard a year ago, but especially now in kind of this period of economic uncertainty, what happens is when you call a customer, they're going to be in one of a few states. Either it's business as usual, either they have no money and they're not spending it, like they just complete budget lockdown, or there's kind of this wiggle room where either it's a pre-approved project is okay, or there's special cases that we can get approved under, which, instance it's upon us to figure out, okay, can we get our thing approved? But like those are the situations your customers find themselves in. So calling with that mindset in mind, rather than what you were planning to do a year ago, is really important, but also being, it's funny. I'm gonna now pull a Ricky Bobby. I've learned so much from Talladega Nights. People have seen the movie, but like I think about the part of the movie where his father puts a cougar in the car. If you remember that, he's like, there ain't nothing like driving with the fear. So, and there ain't nothing scarier than a live cougar in the car. And so, what does he say? He says, yeah, if you're not first, you're last, Andrea. You got it. So he says, if you're calm, that magnificent beast will be calm too. But if you're not, it'll eat you with a smile on its face. And I think about the same thing as we cold call our customers. If we seem nervous or agitated or flustered, or that we have low conviction, or we don't know what we're talking about because we haven't prepared, if I didn't do the research, then our customers can tell. But if I was calling a customer to tell them they just won $10 million in the lottery, I would be able to manifest all this authentic conviction. So how you prepare is super important for how you do in the call.
I want to kind of piggyback on that, Jason, if we can. I think the preparation. Yeah. And so one of the things that we do with our reps here at Abstract is we we always talk about put in the hard work now so you don't have to think when you start picking up the phone. And it kind of ties into preparation. So when you're when you're prospecting, you're building your lists, how granular can you get with the vertical, the size of the company, maybe the tech stack you're using, maybe your buyer persona. And then as you're moving that into sequences, your sequences are very, very specific. You might only have 15 people in a sequence, but when you pick up the phone to call those 15 people, you don't have to think about what you're going to say because your talk track, your pain points, everything is going to be the same for all of those 15 people. You're not switching from a VP of sales to a CMO to whatever role, right? You're very, very specific. So you can be confident that for the next hour of my day, I know exactly the conversation I'm going to have. And I know the exact types of objections I'm going to get. And so going back to preparation, like do the heavy lifting up front so that the time the phone rings, it's easy, right? Your talk tracks, for the next hour, this is the conversation I'm going to have.
Can I just add one quick thing to what Greg said? Because this is a specific tactic we did at Salesforce. So rather than, cold calling doesn't have to be an individual sport. So if you're in a team with a bunch of people that do what you do, and you're all going to cold call, customers at a specific time, a lot of people do call blitzes. But to Greg's point, what you can do is you can say, okay, today between 9 and 10 a.m., we're going to do a call blitz for this product that we sell. Maybe you sell different products to different kinds of buyers. We're just going to target marketing leaders with our marketing product. And here's the collective script, or here's the collective objections, and plan with your team before you all get on the call at the same time, so you can leverage your collective wisdom. That's a really helpful thing that we did a ton.
Yeah.
Yes. So just to kind of zoom out a bit, because I have so much just on what you guys said, there's a lot of gold there. This topic of reluctance, there's kind of two parts to it. There's the mindset, kind of part that, hey, if I have issues with just the activity that I'm doing and it doesn't feel good to me, that's an issue. But the other part of this too is just, yeah, if you don't feel good about your talk track and you haven't practiced it and you don't know it like the back of your hand, yeah, of course you're going to be reluctant to pick up the phone when you're not prepared, So I think to double click on the preparation part, I want to dig into that. List granularity is such an underrated thing. And what I think about is context switching. Like, how can I reduce the amount of context switching? Because even for me, when I'm prospecting, you would think selling sales training is very straightforward, right? Call the salespeople. Well, no, when you're doing outbound stuff, there's sales executives, there's sales development executives. Does sales development roll up into marketing or sales? Like, I don't want to have to balance all those different conversations in one call block. So I'd love to double click into this. What are some other things? David, you had mentioned one of them around Salesforce and segmenting by product. What are some other ways that you guys might think about segmenting call blocks so that I can really get into a rhythm and not have to do too much task switching?
I'll jump in on that one because it's an exercise we're going through right now. So we're, our focus at Abstract has been mainly in the B2B space, but we're definitely seeing a lot more interest in financial services, insurance, and things like that. And so we're going through an exercise of persona work. And so we look at a VP of operations, a director, manager of operations versus mainly like a QA analyst. And so we actually did a lot of research. We talked with our customers. What sucks about your job? What pain points are you always looking to solve for? How did Abstract solve for those? And what we noticed, and it wasn't really a surprise, but all three of them were looking at Abstract to do a different thing in relation to where their view was at the company. At a VP of operations level, reduce headcount, increase efficiency. They don't really care about the tools. Director manager level, agent turnover, training time, reducing training onboarding time. And so we took it not even from like vertical or product, but we went down to the persona so that when we know we're calling a VP of operations in a mid-market insurance company, the main metrics they care about, headcount efficiency, reducing costs. And so we talk about those things. We don't even talk about the features of our product. And so again, get granular at the persona level so you know exactly the pain points you're going to get.
Well, what's really interesting about this too. So what I'm hearing so far is we can think about, hey, maybe we segment by product, maybe we do by industry vertical, maybe we really nail down and do by persona. And when you do all of this work in advance, you kind of take care of 95% of the work so that you don't have to really even do much customization outside of checking out the website or the LinkedIn profile real quick. Because the message I'm coming in with is, I'll use myself as an example, a VP of sales development at a smaller SaaS company that's 300 to 500 employees that has a team of maybe 24, a couple managers, that type of stuff. I can have what feels like a really catered talk track to me without me having to kind of do all this work. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, I love what we're talking about so far. The thing I would add, which is very problematic for a lot of salespeople and prospectors, is they tend to fall in love with their messages and hold on to them for too long. And so if you think about, like, if I was selling personal protective equipment to a hospital pre-pandemic, I might be talking about, oh yeah, well, the price, it's really, affordable, and, delivery timing. Hey, look, we're pretty good. We'll get it there before you need it. And quality. I mean, look, it's industry standards. It's fine. Right. And that might be my message. But now, we're 3 months into the pandemic and you can't get a mask anywhere. Okay. Now the thing that my customer cares about is all of a sudden completely different. Cost, it doesn't matter. Whatever it costs, we'll pay for it, right? Like we needed it here yesterday, and quality, it needs to be top quality. So I say that when we prepare to have these conversations with our clients, going out and saying the same thing that we did 6 months ago may not be relevant, especially, for example, if you're targeting a sales leader that maybe a year ago was aggressively growing their team, kind of accelerating out of the pandemic, but now is kind of in a position where they've had to rescind some offers, maybe they had to lay some people off. The thing they care about is different. And I saw that a ton. So I call this full spectrum selling, which is to basically consider all of the reasons why a customer might buy your solution. And based on what you know about them, kind of triage like the 1, 2, or 3 things that are timely. And I say timely, like, and it could be within the last month timely for people in their role. So that's my take home message. Just don't fall in love. Make sure that you're always, to Greg's point, going out and understanding what your customer cares about today, not necessarily presuming what they care about, but making sure that you're not sounding tone deaf in the mind of your customers. Because if you start targeting them in a manner that showcases that you have not really been paying attention to what's been going on in the market, then not only will you not succeed in the cold call, but you'll actually do personal and reputational damage to your firm as well.
I mean, control your controllables. Like there's so many things that you can control. It's when you don't control those controllables that you have reluctance, right? You can't, like, there's so many, like 95%. You can control 95% of what happens on this call, right? What you can't control is how the person responds or their mood or whether they spilled coffee on them, right? But there's so many other things that you can control that will lead to confidence.
Yes. So for everyone, yes, we're about to get into the more tactical parts of the call and all that other stuff. The way that I think of this and why we're spending so much time on this is I sort of think of the cold call like running a 100-meter dash. Like that 100-meter dash is won or lost in 10 seconds, but it was the years of preparation that an Olympic athlete puts in before that really determine who wins and loses. Cold call is the same kind of thing. The work is sort of done beforehand, to really help set you up with this. So, okay, let's get into the structure of the call. The way I kind of look at the structure, there's sort of the first 30, 60 seconds. There's a lot of interesting data around, the typical cold call lasting somewhere around 70 to 80 seconds. And what I wonder about that data does that include the time that the phone is dialing? Is it counting that as talk time? Which I think it might be, But so there's that intro, making the good first impression. There's kind of the middle part, I call it the hook, just the back and forth, the questions. And there's the wrap up of the call, the close, asking for the meeting, or maybe even deciding that it's not a good fit. Let's talk about intros, and I want to get pretty granular with this. What are we doing like the 30, 60 seconds prior to even dialing the prospect? And what I'm thinking about here is routines, getting my mindset right, making sure I breathe. Maybe people have mantras, and I got a bunch of stuff here that I recommend. I'm curious from you two, though, and I'll kick this question your way, David, first. Anything that you teach or see reps do, or that you found great with your teams, just, hey, as I'm preparing to literally dial this person or to click and dial, is there anything I might do or think about?
The first thing I do is I try to collect all the timely research I can on this person. So for example, if they posted something to social media, even in the last, several hours, there's something timely that I can use to kind of bridge that conversation, but also like getting my talk track down, right? It's like, okay, I'm calling this person. Here's what I know about them. Here's how I'm going to kind of start off the call and showcase my knowledge and do my upfront contract, whatever it is. Because I feel like the more I prepare and the more context I have for this person, it doesn't feel as much as though I'm calling a stranger. And calling strangers is sometimes very, daunting for people. So doing a little bit more of that research just before I get on the call is really important. The other thing that you can do, just as kind of a little bit of an aside, is like the cold call doesn't have to be the first time you've ever reached out to this person. Like you can you can kind of warm them up over email, or you've already invited them to something. So you're not a stranger. Oh, hey, it's David calling from, Cerebral Selling. I sent you a note last week and I just wanted to follow up because A, B, and C, and I've been working with, X, Y, and Z, clients. And so, I mean, you wouldn't say it all in one kind of monologue like that, but you can kind of warm them up in advance. But the more context you have, I'll tell you, and I'll just tell you this quick story. One of the best cold calls I ever got was from a recruiter who called me up and he said, hey, David, it's me from, whatever recruiting firm. Hey, look, I'm sure you get prospected by people trying to recruit you and recruiters all the time. And they really don't know anything about you. They just have a mandate. Here's what I know about you. And he proceeded to like unload all of these like very personal things that made me kind of perk up and say, okay, he's done some homework. And when you do a little bit of that homework, this amazing thing happens. There's this element of reciprocity where a customer feels, oh my gosh, Jason did this like a little bit. It doesn't even have to be a lot, a little bit of work before they called me. And so now I want to give them just a little bit of my time to kind of hear what they have to say. So that little bit of preparation in advance goes a long way.
Yeah, I won't waste time echoing what David just said, but I would add two things. Make sure I have my fidget spinner and make sure I'm standing. And those two things usually set me up for success.
Do you have the little keychain looking thing that you twirl? Is it that thing?
No, it's just one of the normal ones. Because like Claire, our VP of marketing, would get so mad at me because I would sit here and I would click my pen all the time on doing webinars and podcasts, and or all my pens are broken. So I eventually just got a regular fidget spinner.
Yeah, that's funny. I think the standing thing is something I always recommend too. Standing up, I like to pace when I call, and for me it's just much more comfortable, and my energy, like I'm standing right now versus sitting, I just find personally my energy is just way different standing up. The other thing too, this is kind of a simple thing, but just basic box breathing. If you're one of those people that the first couple dials for me, my heart races pretty fast. And what I catch myself doing, this used to happen to me a lot when I was doing live events like this, and I've done enough of them now, I feel more comfortable. But I would notice, dude, you're not breathing, man. Like you're talking and you're short of breath, and just getting a breath in prior to making the call can be really, really good. Yeah, Daniela does power posing and breathing, it sounds like. So whatever your kind of routine is, that's great. Sometimes I like to have a little bit of motivational music, so for me, Return of the Mac is like the song I put on when I need to get into a good mood.
Not Eye of the Tiger. Just gonna
little Eye of the
yourself
Tiger.
In the bathroom with Eye of the Tiger. Like,
Colin's rocking some Metallica, it looks like. Okay. So the first part of the intro, what you just shared in your example, David, is I think there's two really powerful things as we start to get to the intro. One, he took the objection away. So this is that preparation, that messaging where that anytime I get a call from a recruiter, I'm thinking, like, as a prospect, another call, another email from some person that's mass blasting. He took that objection away, which I thought was really interesting. And then the relevance, like packing in something about the person as soon as you can, and like really front loading that as much as possible. Let's get into some of the dynamics, and I'll kick this question your way, Greg, first. How are we introducing ourselves? Like, what is that opening statement? Prospect says hello. What are we doing next?
Yeah, I mean, so going back to don't impose things on expectations on other people. I still have a lot of work to do myself on that. I am very much, hey, Jason, my name is Greg. I'm from Abstract. This is why I'm calling you. If you'll take 10 seconds, you'll be able to tell me after we're done whether or not it makes sense. And it's usually like, you are the director of sales development. I notice you guys are using XYZ on your Zoom info technographics. I notice you guys have 4 headcount open on LinkedIn for SDRs. Our customers usually come to us trying to handle X, Y, and Z. Does any of that resonate with you? Nope, we're all good. Cool. And then I usually will kind of push back on that, but I try to get a why you, why now, here's my reason, why it's relevant. I try to cram all that in very, very quickly so that person can make an informed decision whether or not that makes sense to continue the conversation.
And are you guys calling on sales executives?
Like AEs, like individual contributors?
Oh, no, like director and above.
Yeah, VP, director. Yep, absolutely. Brett asked a question like, no, we're good. And I always kind of will make an assumption, or I like Chris Voss's fair. Okay, so Brett, is it fair to say that all of your reps handle every objection they face with flawless execution every single time? Well, no. Okay. Well, how are you handling objection handling then?
Yeah.
And so I'll always try to throw in like a fair, assumptive statement that I know they can't say yes to then kind of get that conversation moving in the right direction.
we just opened up Pandora's box. There's a whole stuff we can get into with objections there. So what I'm hearing from you, your approach is you like to just be really straightforward. And one thing I want to comment on, God, this part is so important. I'm not how you say it is way more important than what you say. But with cold calling, it's probably 2/3 how your delivery and then 1/3 of what you're saying. With Greg, you just hear him in this, and this is something I listen to in a lot of cold calls that's missing, where there's stumbling. Hey, this is Jason, and I was giving you a call, and there's just the economy of words is not there, and it's not very clear. I actually learned this going door to door selling house painting services, where we would say painting really clear to hey, I'm here with X company. We're doing painting in your neighbor. Like really enunciating. Hey, this is Jason Bay with Outbound Squad. The reason for my call, like really enunciating very clearly, because the thing that you're doing, and let me know if you guys disagree, your prospect picked up the phone. They probably didn't pick it up thinking it was a cold call, and they're really eager to hear what you had to say. They're context switching. They're probably doing something else and just really going clear. David, what are your thoughts on tonality, delivery, pace? Something you do really well also.
I'm going to go back to my, cougar comment. And if you're calm, right, that magnificent beast will be calm too. But also, I love the permission-based openers, as Greg's kind of highlighting. But also, the fact that this is a conversation. This is not a monologue. And I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. I see this a lot. So someone cold calls my house, okay? And we don't recognize the number. And my wife answers the phone and she says, hello. And then I'm just watching her. And she's just kind of sitting there on the phone. And she's giving me like the look. And then like 20 seconds later, she's like, oh, no, sorry, we're not interested. So that rep's been going on a monologue for 20 seconds, trying not to let her get an word in edgewise so they could give her like the sum total of all the ways they can add value, which I think is not the right way to do it. I like the approach of like, hey, it's Greg calling from Abstract. I know you weren't expecting my call. Can I just share why I'm calling? And then you can tell me if you want to continue the conversation. Boom. I like this idea of what you're saying, Jason, of like, hey, it's I'm from Abstract. Like I said the name of the company. I think actually sometimes people intentionally, and I don't know who teaches this, but intentionally obfuscate the name of their company or kind of mumble it through so that the customer doesn't have an opportunity to say like, oh, I don't need that. Right. But the reality is, if, for example, I think someone asked in the feed, they say, well, what you have to say is not a priority, for us. Then, what you can always do is reframe. Like, and I'm just going to like a specific tactic. So you can say, hey, look, I totally understand. First of all, I'm acknowledging and empathizing. I wouldn't say those words. I'm telling you to do that. Like, hey, look, totally understand. It may not be a priority. Do you mind if I ask, like when sometimes people say it's not a priority, it can sometimes mean, there's no budget. It does sound interesting, but just the timing's off. Or maybe you've just never invested in this kind of thing before and you don't even know what the value is. Like, and by the way, this not a priority kind of objection, this can happen anywhere in the sales cycle, right? And so I like this kind of reframe of like, okay, what does not a priority mean? And this doesn't have to be an objection handling, class here, but the example I always give is, let's say I ask Jason out on a date. And,
this escalated quickly.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm using this webinar for my own personal romantic, but I say, so I say, Jason, we met at, Greg's party, last week, we seem to hit it off. What do you say? Like we go out Saturday night. Now, Jason doesn't want to go with me. Okay. What does Jason say?
I'm married.
So he's putting the brakes on. Yeah. Marshall's saying, hey, look, just dating is not a priority for me now. But what a lot of people might say is they might say, well, I'm busy Saturday.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I'm busy is the sales equivalent of it's too expensive or it's not a priority. It's like, what the heck does that mean? I don't even know what that means. So sometimes we get an objection, we have to clarify, and we do that by giving people options. And if they pick one of the options, then great. Now we have a road to go down. If they pick none or they're just trying to get off the phone with us, then we know that, there's really no substance to it and they don't want to talk at the moment.
So someone says like, this isn't a priority, I don't have time. I usually like to be like, well, that's actually why I'm calling you. Chances are you don't know that our tool exists. And it's only not a priority for you because you don't know the value that it could bring to you. I mean, I'm being a little direct there, but I'll throw that back on them. Like, hey, that's actually why I'm calling you, because I know you're struggling right now and I know I can help. So I always try to I'm too busy, not a priority. Like, that's why I'm calling you, because you are too busy. You don't have enough time in your day to do what you're doing. And I can help you with that.
So this is the first place where people tend to get objections, is right in this intro. I want to throw out a couple more ideas for people, because you really want to prevent these objections from happening. I think it's important to talk about why a prospect might say not interested at the very beginning. I find a lot of it is lack of business acumen. So if you don't demonstrate that you know what you're doing, you're a peer, you did your research, you're going to get a lot of objections at the beginning. You shouldn't be getting not interested after you introduce yourself. So your tonality and your delivery is super important. One other thing that I've been finding a lot of success with is that little relevance bit, packing that at the front of your permission-based opener. So be like, so I don't even introduce myself. I save the introduction for the end of the first statement. Hey, David, I was giving you a call. I noticed that you guys are hiring a bunch of SDRs right now. Oh, by the way, this is Jason with Outbound Squad. I know I probably caught you in the middle of something. You got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling? Like I said, I noticed you're hiring a bunch of SDRs, and typically when people are doing this, they're focused on these things, right? And that relevant part at the very beginning, if you find yourself getting a lot of resistance, like, try packing that at the very front of the call too. That could be pretty effective. So before we get into objections, again, the goal is to anticipate these and to prevent them from happening, not to be an expert at objection handling. So go ahead, Greg.
It goes back to prepare. Like, know your buyer, know what they're going to say as the objection ahead of time. And, make sure you either prepare for it or you have technology in place to help you overcome the objection.
Yep. Exactly.
And to the point, know who you're calling. One of the things I was working on with a client yesterday was this concept I talk about called inoculation. It's not my concept, but I talk about it in my book. And it's a concept called inoculation theory, which is basically raising the objection before the customer does, which is, an example would be, hey, look, I know I'm calling you out of the blue and you weren't expecting my call, but, right? Or let's say you're calling a customer who you feel like might be in kind of a lockdown of budget mode. Hey, look, I know you weren't expecting my call. And, these days I know lots of clients are in different positions as far as their budget. Some are completely locked out. Some are just, doing only pre-approved things. Hey, look, I get it. So you're kind of inoculating them against the thing that they're probably going to say. Marcos, I just want to respond to your note here. You mentioned, how do you handle the send me an email brush off, which, again, this can happen at any point in the conversation. At the end, after 5 minutes, it can be send me an email. And I have to defer. One of the best examples I've seen of this, which I'm sure a lot of people use, but I saw one of my clients do, which was awesome. He said, look, Greg, I'm happy to send you an email if you'd like, but I'll tell you, 95% of the time after I send people emails, I just never hear from them again. And then I have to follow up, and then I got and you don't want that. And I don't want that. So, and then I can kind of reframe it there. So it's funny how we keep talking about this preparation. The more prepared we are, in terms of where the conversation can go and the objections that we can get, so we're not caught off guard, will help us be calm. And you know what I think about being calm, right? Calm is good.
Can we touch on the send me an email one? I know we're not doing objections, but I really like that objection.
Let's get into the objections.
Okay. So I love the send me the email one. It's actually my favorite objection to ever get, because I'll be like, hey, you know what? There's a lot I can send you an email on. Are you okay if I ask you a couple questions just to make sure that I send you the right information? And then they're like, yes. And then it's giving me permission to ask some qualifying questions. Like, how are you handling this? What's your current conversion metrics from contact to conversion to meeting? How often is your team handling objections the way they're supposed to? So it gives me, again, kind of, David, you mentioned, I never hear from you again. That's probably because I sent you a bunch of crappy information that you didn't find relevant, right? So if you're okay with it, 2 or 3 more questions, I'll make sure what lands in your inbox is extremely relevant for you.
100%. In fact, you can use the same handle if a customer says, call me back in 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is, right? You can say, well, I'm happy to do that. Do you want me can I just tell you what we might talk about in 6 months? And then you can decide if you even want me to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, again, I think sometimes as salespeople, we think our job is to kind of pursue customers, to no end. And I still do believe a lot of salespeople give up too early, and the data supports that as well. But sometimes, I think about this example. I used to teach many years ago self-defense to kids. And kids would always say, like, how am I supposed, like, if a grown-up comes and grabs me, like, what am I supposed to do to get out of this thing? And, the answer we would give is we would say, have you ever tried to hold a 10-pound house cat that doesn't want to be held? Right? Like, you can, like, they scroll out of it. And it's the same thing. Like, even the best cold callers will not bat 100. There's people who just don't want to talk to you and will never want to talk to you. And, like, it's like this 10-pound house cat. And so it's okay to let some people go after you've pulled out all of your best moves of, like, let me tell you what we would talk about, or like, hey, tell me what you're concerned about so I can send you the right email. And they're still like, get away from me. Sometimes it's okay to let them go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Can't get them all. Yeah. The other thing I noticed too, just along with objection handling, is, not being afraid to, like, work with a little bit of resistance. And rule of 3, ask for the meeting at least 3 times.
Yeah.
Before you hang out, and there are ways to go about that for me, I don't know about you guys, my biggest, put a smile on your face when you're objection handling. It's like the way that both you two had said the email thing, which I'm going to drop into the chat here in a second, where you can just be this disarmingly blunt, is what I've heard people call it, where you can be really blunt and direct, but do it in, I think, of Hugh Grant. If you can channel, if you're a guy, I don't know what the equivalent, Meryl Streep maybe for the women on the call today, I don't know. But, like, if you can channel that inner, like, Hugh Grant, like that, the character that he plays, it's really interesting. Like, the things that you can ask and get away with, so to speak, if your demeanor is really great. I just dropped into the chat. I love the approach that you two guys mentioned, where basically ask them a few questions, but then I would ask for the meeting right after that too. Hey, Greg, so you mind if I make a quick suggestion? Yeah. The things that you said just now are things that we hear from clients like A and B. They share the same exact things. Like, would it be crazy if we set up maybe 10 or 15 minutes? We can unpack a little bit more, and I'm not calling you in the middle of your day. Do you have your calendar handy? And you just go, and you know what? They might say no there again, but there's a certain percentage of the time, 10, 20% of the time, where they might be like, okay, where you kind of called them out on the bluff, so to speak. So that's the email one. Let's rewind a bit. First 30, 60 seconds of the call, this is where you're most likely to get a not interested, not right now, I'm about to head into a meeting, all of those kind of stuff. Greg, I'll kick this question your way first. How do we address some of those? And you have some data, actually, that I'd love for you to share from abstracting the calls that you guys have analyzed, but these kind of like brush off type objections that people call them, what's the best way to approach handling these and to think about these?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I forget how many calls, but 91% of them through our system over a period of time, they were call me back, I'm in a meeting, too busy, like general brush off type situations. What was fascinating was when we looked at our customer implementations, very few of our customers were actually building recommended responses for those general brush offs. Most of it was around competitive type of stuff or product related or pricing, things like that. And so it's been really interesting watching across industries, B2B software, insurance, fintech, no one is really training their reps around those types of objections. Again, it all goes back to I'm too busy, call me backs, all those things. I try to handle the objection the same way. Like, that's actually why I'm calling. You're too busy. Hey, happy to call you back. But when I do call you back, do you want to know what I'm going to talk to you about in the first place? This isn't a priority right now. Okay, well, that's exactly why I'm calling. I'm in a meeting. Oh, well, I love that I'm in a meeting one, because I'm like, oh, that must be a really boring meeting then to pick up a cold call. Like, yeah. What are you watching? What's on the meeting that you're supposed to be watching? And then that one instantly is like calling them out on their kind of bullshit. Like, no, you're not actually in a meeting that you need to pay attention to. So I think it's again, the data that we've found across our customers is that is the most common type of objection, the least trained objection. And in my mind, again, to your point, Jason, that's like the first 30 seconds, get past that one, and you can generally get to some type of next steps. Those are the easiest objections because they're the vaguest, and so it allows you to get a little bit more specific. And if you're confident, like oh, you're in a meeting right now, must be a really boring meeting. You have to say that with some swagger. Like that can't be said like stumbling. Like you have to like be quick with that.
Yeah. That's where practice comes in. This is the most underrated part of cold calling is even now I've been doing this in one form or another for 16 years, cold outreach or door to door or whatever. I still, before I make cold calls, like rehearse a couple times, the opener. Like I want to have that down, What are your thoughts, David, on brush offs? How to approach the not interested, I'm about to head into a meeting, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take it in a kind of a little different approach and maybe focus on kind of like the 60-second mark, or kind of like, well, what do I want to direct you to? Because oftentimes we get the brush off. Sometimes it's, just categorically, I don't want to talk now. But sometimes maybe I've asked you for something. If I say, hey, do you have 5 minutes to chat? Maybe that's too much of an ask. Like I've asked for something, and I always think about this with respect to next steps, because a lot of my clients, we focus a ton on like, what's the good next step to set? And the problem with next steps is that all next steps introduce friction into the sales cycle. And if I ask someone to do something they are not motivated to do, then I introduce too much friction. So I always think as like a cold caller or a seller, what tools do I have in my arsenal that I can offer to the customer that is a good next step? It's a lower lift. It keeps them engaged. I think, HubSpot really nailed this back in the day where they had this like website grader, this tool that they could send to customers that would allow them, hey, look, you don't have to talk to me. Go on to this website. I'm going to send you the URL, and I want you to put in your URL address, and it's going to generate a report with all of this stuff. Salesforce did this. It was a little bit more of a heavier lift with data.com. But the idea was to give people a gift that reduces the friction for them to take that next step, that doesn't require them to give their personal information or to like commit to like a big meeting with you. So I always want you to think about, as you're preparing, what are those like little gifts or off ramps I can give to my customer that are still value added for both of us, that reduce the friction of that next step in that ask?
So there's a couple of messages in the chat, Jason, around like, we're happy with current solution, we're happy with our current banker, stuff like that. I always like to handle those with, well, what do you like about them? Why are you happy? Because people will talk for a smidge about what they like, but then they always will start talking about what they don't like. It's like this 60% of the time it works every time. I feel like it's more like 90% of the time it works every time, where like get them to start talking about what they'd like, and then people naturally just start talking about what they don't like. Yeah. And that's your opportunity. So that's another objection. We have something in place already. Cool. Why'd you pick them? What do you like about them?
Yeah, I like that. It's the acknowledging, hey, sounds like you might have something in place. Sounds like you're taken care of. I also like to, depending on if it's software, it's a little easier with software, pros and cons. Hey, sounds like you got something in place, Greg. I'm really curious because we talk to a lot of clients that are using us, and what they really like is X, Y, Z, but sometimes what they don't really like is X, Y, Z. What are your thoughts on that? What's your experience been? So if I can be really specific with something that I know might be a challenge for them. So I got a client that, they have like all of the kind of software, like when you watch an NFL game, for example, it's the software on the screen. Like that's what their software does, right? Where I might say something, hey, it sounds like you got a solution in place. A lot of the marketing departments that we talk to really like that solution because, it's drag and drop, sort of easy to use. But one thing that we hear a lot is that they still have to use 3 or 4 other tools as well. And they're just looking for ways to simplify this and get stuff up on the screens faster. What's your experience been? Or you could even be more pointed around a problem. I'm curious if you're willing to share, how long does it typically take to like do a production? Or how many people are typically involved? You can like really get very specific with your battle cards there too. What about you, David? What are your thoughts? We already have a solution in place, which is so rare, really. I feel like on a cold call to get that objection, but someone that's like probably going to say we're already taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny. And again, this can come up anywhere in the sales cycle, but oftentimes people think, and this is so pervasive in sales in general, people think that they're actually doing a good job. So let's say I sell IT security software and I call a customer and they say, no, we're good with our IT security. The reality is for most people, it's like they actually don't even realize how exposed they are, right? And so I kind of subscribe to this mindset. I talk about this in my book. Sometimes if you want to sell someone a Band-Aid, you have to cut them first. And I say you should not intentionally harm any of your customers. But sometimes people have problems that they don't even realize they have because they don't know what good looks like, right? And so I like, Jason, to your point about asking, well, how long does this take you today? Well, like, for example, when Greg said he was getting 2,000, spam calls a week, and everyone was reacting, holy shit, that's a lot of calls. Like, Greg might think that's actually normal. Doesn't everyone get that? And we would say, Greg, like, you should be getting, like, there must be something wrong with your, with your spam filter, because, like, you shouldn't be getting that many emails. And Greg's like, oh my gosh, all of a sudden, Greg has been cut. And now he's bleeding in the best possible way. And now I can kind of follow up with, like, well, hey, look, I'm happy to help, and kind of frame the rest of my conversation from there.
Make customer stories so important. So if you can illustrate that through, hey, we're already taking care of, well, hey, this might be a long shot. I don't know if you're like another client that we work with, Greg. He was getting 4,000 emails a month, cold emails. And he didn't realize that if he put a couple filters in place, he could like reduce that by 75% and just waste less time sorting through his inbox. Is that by chance something you're running into as well? Or, it's like the customer story is what I always go back to with objections, because the two types mostly in prospecting that you're getting is an objection to being interrupted. That's the not interested. It's the I'm in a meeting. So you need to address that. Or it's an objection to, I call it time value trade. It's like they just don't think that spending more time with you would be valuable. So don't solve that objection by pitching your solution and why it's different or better. Like, talk about why it would be valuable to continue talking to you. And the best way to do that is through a customer story. Like, another customer voice is like, you don't need to, when someone makes a claim themselves, it feels like bragging. And it's like, I don't trust that. But when you reference a customer, it's just stories sell, We got about 5 minutes here. I want to ask you guys about some other things related to cold calling. We've kind of talked about the intro, the middle part. Let's talk about the disqualifying. So, because you don't want to do like really heavy qualification on a call, because that's kind of weird. But if you guys find out that a prospect maybe is not a good fit, what do we do?
Well, first things first, I like to like kind of play a game sometimes, and like FOMO, fear of missing out. Like, hey, you know what? Like, you may not be a good fit. Like, I kind of like to intentionally try to use that because it ultimately usually makes people come in and lean into the conversation anymore. But in terms of like disqualifying, I don't think I've ever really had too much of that on cold calls, mainly because like my goal has always been to, like, going back to the preparation, like I should generally have done a very good job of knowing why I'm calling this person. And so I always go in with more of an assumption that this person's, my outcome is qualified because I've done all the disqualification up front. Unless they're like, yeah, I got fired yesterday and my company went bankrupt. I'm like, okay, well, couldn't prepare for that. But I don't really spend too much time myself back when I made a lot more cold calls, or my team, like disqualifying, because all the work should have been done up front to know that that person has a very high likelihood of being qualified.
Yeah. So the only other example I could think of is if you have certain tech stack requirements. So if what you're selling requires Salesforce, for example, or other kinds of stuff like that. What are your thoughts, David?
Yeah, like, I subscribe to a bunch of kind of mindsets in this front. Like, number one, I say, like, sell more by losing faster. Like, I don't want to waste my time with people who are a bad fit. So if I've done my research and I learned something on the cold call that indicates that they are not a good fit, then I'm happy to kind of like cut my losses. Now, as long as I feel confident that I put the effort in and that, they're not a good fit, I don't want to waste my time with them. The other thing is to kind of like maybe find out and learn, like, why aren't they a good fit? Like, maybe I did something wrong. I'm not suggesting I said something wrong on the call, but maybe my research was incorrect or inaccurate. Maybe there's a helpful follow-up that I could do to nurture this person. But yeah, like, it's funny. Like, it does, to your point, like, it doesn't happen very often where it's just categorically the wrong person, or the wrong message. The other thing you can do, though, and sometimes it's like, I want to cut my losses because they say, oh, it's not me, or I'm leaving, or whatever. It's okay to kind of, to cut that conversation off, regroup, and take another run at the organization trying to get to someone else, right? Like that person might be wrong, but the organization might be right. And you may have just learned something on that call that says, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time with this person. Let me regroup, get my ducks in a row, and then go after the organization some other way.
That's a great point, right? Like you're not selling the contact, you're selling the account. And so be open to pivoting to a different contact within the account.
Yeah. Ian Koniak always says, don't take a no from someone that can't say yes, you know, which I love that. A couple other things just from the Q&A I want to get to. Brett Davidson has a question. What are your guys' thoughts on auto dialers?
I've seen them set up very poorly most of the time, where it's just a bunch of contacts. Like, again, going back to, I love it. We have one of our customers, Security Scorecard, where they have it very segmented. It's like target market, title, state. And so it's like you're going through and you might call 600 people in an hour, and every single one of them is very, very specific and narrow. And so again, if you can cram more of good fits into a period of time, right, it increases efficiency. But where it gets messy is where it's like there's 20 titles, 20 different segments of companies all thrown into this list, because then you're just back and forth switching between talk tracks. So I'm all about them when you do them right.
My experience with auto dialers is limited, but what I kind of go back to is, if does the auto dialer provide sufficient opportunity for the rep to prepare and get into that mindset? If I'm just like sitting in front of the computer and like people are popping up like at a moment's note, like then maybe it doesn't give me a chance to get into that mindset. So that can be challenging as well, even though you're basically trading off speed for potentially quality and preparedness. So that's a question, is like, is that productivity boost, such as it is, worthwhile?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm totally on the same page with you guys here. Segmentation, just so I can be really targeted. And with a lot of the dialers like an Orem, you can have a field in there where you can put your research too, so you have some customized stuff. But yeah, if you're using it as a way to convert 5% of the people you talk to in a meeting versus 20, to me, that's not productive, at least for large mid-market or enterprise selling. That just doesn't make sense. You guys, this flew by. We got to run. Couple quick things. One, go check out Abstract. I dropped a link into the chat. David, where can people go to connect with you if they want a little bit more about cerebral selling and all the stuff that you're up to? I'll drop your LinkedIn profile in there as well.
Yeah, I'm a friendly person. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I give tons of stuff away on my site, Cerebral Selling. My book is called Sell the Way You Buy, and you can get that on Amazon, wherever you buy books. So yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Cool. I dropped your LinkedIn profile in. And Greg, where's the best place to go to connect with you? It sounds
Not
like the phone and email is probably.
LinkedIn works great. Yeah, don't email me or call me.
Yeah, cool. All right, everyone. Appreciate the engagement. This is awesome.
Guys.
Have a good rest of your day. And Greg and David, thank you.
Thanks,
we'll see you guys.
David. Great work. Bye, guys.
Pleasure.
Later.
Yeah. Likewise, guys.
See ya.